Craft a winning international content strategy. This is the topic of today's webinar. My name is George. I'm the managing director of Minuttia and the founder of Growth Waves. And let's get started with some basics. First of all, let's answer the question, what is international content strategy? International content strategy is a methodical planning, creation, and management of content for diverse global audiences, considering the differences and variations in terms of culture and anything else that these audiences may have. Okay, now the question of why is an international content strategy important is the question we should ask right after answer the what, right? Four main reasons, even though we could definitely find more, but the most prominent ones is because an international content strategy helps you diversify your traffic and acquisition sources by targeting people in different countries. Okay, it also helps you lower your customer acquisition costs, especially if you are a SaaS. That would be a familiar word, CAC, right? By targeting countries with less competition, because yes, in most cases we are interested in the US market, which is a very strong market and a very prominent one for SaaS companies. But exactly the fact that it's a strong market and a market most of us want to be in makes it very competitive. And as an extension, acquisition is hard in that market. So you could have lower CACs by targeting other countries with less competition. The third point, an international content strategy helps you offer a cohesive experience to your website visitors and general audience, assuming that they speak, they join your website from a different country where people there speak a language that's not English. And last but not least, it helps you mainly from a brand standpoint ensure that your content is culturally appropriate and inclusive. Okay. I would say that the word here that comes to mind when it comes to international content strategy is proactiveness. Okay, and a while ago I had an interview with Fabrizio Ballarini, who is the head of organic growth at Wise, formerly TransferWise. And if you don't know TransferWise, now Wise, you should definitely check them out. They're doing a great job when it comes to organic growth. And they are also doing a great job when it comes to localizing content and producing content in many different languages for many different regions. And one of the things that he told me during this interview was that we even produce content for the places we are not currently operating yet for two reasons. Because A, at some point we will get there, and B, there is a good chance, even though that's not always the case, and we will see an example of that later on, there is a good chance that serving the same intent with a localized page for the ad audience is going to work in that country and for that audience as well. But there are exceptions to that second point, okay? So international content strategy is about being proactive with things, right? Now, in general, there are three ways of approaching international content strategy. First, we have translation, which is as simple as converting a blog post from English to Spanish without changing any other elements like links, visuals, and so on and so forth. Then we have localization, which is the blog post would replace, in our example, US-centric examples with relevant Spanish ones. Dollar references would change to euros, and outgoing links would be adjusted accordingly so that they point to pages that are in Spanish. And last but not least, we also have what's called internationalization, which is a difficult word, definitely, and it entails in the same vein as the two previous examples, new blog posts that are universally understandable and designed for easy translation. The blog's code base needs to accommodate various languages, currency formats, and so on and so forth. Okay. Now, for the sake of this webinar, we will focus on mainly on localization, and we will also share an example of translation, just so you can see that you can get great results just by translating your website or parts of it, right? Now, the first localization example we have is Ahrefs, right? Which has parts of its website localized in 12 languages besides English. And let's take a look at Ahrefs. As you can see here, right now we are in Ahrefs' German version of their blog. And if I scroll down a bit, I will see blog posts that are in German, which makes sense. But here we can see something interesting. We can see that they have videos with German titles, right? And if you click on any of these videos, you will see that they are part of the German channel they have on YouTube, okay? And if you visit their main channel and click on channels, you will see that they have this not only in German, but also they have a Russian channel. They have one for Germany, of course, one for Spain and Spanish, one for Italian, and one for Japanese, right? So this is a very decent localization effort. And we understand that this is localization because, as I explained, from the main blog page, we can get to like specific content that's in German, right, in this example. And here we have a blog post with, I guess, Google ranking factors, okay? And if I click on backlinks, as you can see here, there is an anchor text that reads backlinks. I will get to another blog post that's in German once again, okay? And this means that, the content, or to put it differently, when you get from one page to another, there is a cohesive experience. And this tells us that, it's not like they just translated this piece of content. It's like they translated other piece of content and they interlink between each other. And not only that, but they have translated, as you can see here, the graphics that are included in this piece of content, okay? Now, this is localization, which goes beyond just simply translating this piece of content and publishing the translated version, okay? Going back to our presentation, we have another example by SE Ranking, okay? And SE Ranking is a very interesting example. Why? Because they have, as you can see here, their main webinars page, and we have the selection all languages by default, and then we can choose English, Spanish, French, and so on and so forth. So if I click here on Spanish, I will see content, webinars in this case, that are on demand in that language, okay? And this, once again, is a localization effort, because it's not like they have a webinar that's in English and they just simply like found a person to sort of create or recreate the webinar in that language. They have speakers who can talk that language, okay? And then we also have another example, which is vid.io. If you don't know them, they are doing a tremendous job when it comes to their organic growth. And this is a translation example, though. But still, as you will see in a minute, it works really, really, really well for them. So a while back, if I'm not mistaken, it's been a year now, we published this blog post on how Vid managed to grow their organic traffic. And towards the end of the blog post, we included a section with opportunities. In other words, things that they were missing. And the first opportunity we highlighted was the presence, or the lack of it in this case, in non-English speaking countries, okay? And so, as you can see here, this is the like original version, let's say, of their website. And taking a look at Ahrefs, they are not doing they are doing pretty well, actually, right? I mean, you can see here that they rank for over 1.6 million organic keywords, and they bring in more than 6.5 million organic visits per month, okay? Now, taking this a step further, you can take a look at their XML sitemap and see that they have actually localized versions of their homepage, which tells you that there is a chance that they have localized versions of other pages on their website, and they have it in, if I'm not mistaken, more than 30 different locations, languages, and regions. And we can see here in this example, we have what how the Spanish version of their website is performing, and we can see that things started picking up somewhere around May of 2022. Okay, now using Ahrefs portfolios feature, we can see that, and actually we took 35 URLs, which is the number of languages and regions they are targeting through their translation strategy. And we can see that actually, the rollout was somewhere around May of 2022. Okay, this is where things start picking up in terms of like crawled pages and in terms of traffic, of course. Okay, and the interesting thing about that is that here, this is, I think, Danish for Denmark, and we can see that, clicking at different links on this page, we can see that we get to not like localized versions of like these links, these pages, but English ones. Okay, and we can get to the blog, but not the localized version, the original one in English, and same for their YouTube channel, as you can see, and same for the sign up page. Okay, and the point I want to make here is that even though in this case we are talking about translation, right, and not localization, you can still see the benefits of following that strategy, right? Back to our presentation. Let me. Okay. Do we have any questions so far, Travis? You can feel free to stop me, and I can do a couple of questions if we have any.
Yeah, we're rocking and rolling. And keep going.
Okay. So let's talk about process, okay? Because we like saw these examples. Now we should start like getting deeper into things and talk about process when it comes to your international content strategy. We have 6 steps in this process. We start with international keyword research, which is all about identifying keyword opportunities based on existing content, as we will see in a minute, and identifying new keyword opportunities. Then you have to prioritize things, right? Because you can't go after every single language, every single country you want to go after. You have to find the biggest opportunities, and based on these opportunities, like identify keywords and so on and so forth. We are going to talk about URL structure, which is important, of course, and I don't include it in like technical SEO and technical aspect of things when it comes to your international content strategy, because it's the first step towards like launching an international content strategy. And technical SEO, which comes next, as you can see here, includes other things like canonicalization, hreflang tags, and so on and so forth. Then we have actually localizing the content you have prioritized and creating new content based on new opportunities, untapped opportunities. And last but not least, in order for this content to be accessible, there have to be some adjustments in terms of design, so that your localized content becomes accessible. Okay, let's start with international keyword research based on existing content and pages, as I mentioned, and based on new opportunities. The first approach involves analyzing and leveraging existing content that you have, or very close direct competitors of yours have. And the second is based on new opportunities, because don't assume that your competitor has covered everything when it comes to like their localized content. And there are definitely more opportunities out there that you can uncover and go after. At this point, and before we get to what to pay attention to, let me share a case that. So a while back, just to give you some context, we worked with a company which was a Canva alternative. Okay, I guess you all know Canva. They are a great SaaS company, and they are doing a great job when it comes to their organic, growth. And what we did is that, first of all, we started by the localized versions, right? As we explained earlier with vid.io, and we saw that back then there were around 30 localized versions. Right now, maybe the numbers are a bit different, right? And so we have, the first one, the first URL, French, target language for France, right? We took the number of organic keywords and the organic traffic according to Ahrefs, both metrics that they were bringing in for that country. And then what we did is that we also took the number of indexed pages with, of course, an asterisk here, because the way we did that is through Google search, is that number over here, which is definitely not accurate. And, I may search for it right now and I may get a different number, but it works, it serves well as a placeholder as to how many pages they have for that specific, country, right? And with that, we came up with an average traffic per page, which basically indicated the level of opportunity for that country, okay? And so we took that a step further, and we said that, you know what, these are the target pages that we think about like localizing, and these are the pages we compete against with Canva, which we know does a great job when it comes to localization, and as it so happens in this example, has a localized page in German for Germany, okay? Now, the next thing that we did is that we said, okay, what's the target keyword in English? In this example, the target keyword was presentation software, okay? Through like Ahrefs and our own research, we tried to match that to the best keyword we could for the German language, right, and the German country. And of course, nowadays you have more options when it comes to translation. ChatGPT could be one, and you could work with it right on the seat, as you can see here, okay, for any language that you want. But I would say the reason why you should, have 2 or 3 different options is because at the end of the day, you have to choose, right? And you have to go with one keyword, and this will also affect your URL slag. So it's important that you have, you can compare between 2 or 3 options and go with the best option that, or what seems to be the best option, okay? And so this is how we worked in that case with the Canva alternative SaaS company that I just mentioned. We started by like taking a close look at their at the localized versions of their website, right, and try to understand where the bigger opportunities lie. And then for the countries that we chose, we went ahead and we tried to match English versions of pages to localized pages if Canva had such a page. Otherwise, we would do research ourselves and we would come up with the best keyword to target. Okay, Travis, I see a couple of comments, or I don't know if there are any questions. Would you like me to answer any of these, if there are indeed any questions?
I think the one main question we kind of got from Anonymous was, you mentioned using ChatGPT and other AI. Is there a use case, and maybe we'll cover it in a little bit, but is there a use case of leveraging AI to actually write the content of those localized pages, or is it heavily relied on native human writers?
Great question. In general, let me preface that by saying that I am negatively predisposed when it comes to using GPT powered tools for content creation, and the same applies to translation. Okay, And we are not talking about just translation, we are talking about localization here, which, you know, is a step like further. So that's not to say that, like, if you have an e-commerce website and you have, I don't know, 100 product descriptions and you want to leverage one of these tools to get like translated versions of these descriptions, you shouldn't do it, right? But it's another thing translating a 100 word on average product description, and another thing translating or even localizing a, I don't know, 2000 word blog post. Okay, so my answer, I guess, is nothing stops you from doing that, but you should definitely be aware of the fact that these tools have limitations, right? And if they have limitations in English, you should definitely be aware of the limitations when it comes to translating content, and the fact that if you're going to go with that option, you should definitely at least have someone who speaks that language as a guardrail, let's say, edit the content and make sure that, you know, you will not have anything that strikes as very wrong or odd to people from that language who speak that, you know, from that country who speak that language, who, you know, don't make any sense of what they are reading. I don't know if that makes sense, but I think the short answer, sure, you can do it, but be aware of the limitations and definitely involve people in the process.
Awesome. Yeah, that's helpful.
Do we have anything else?
No, that's good. And keep moving.
Okay. Another way we are using today, nowadays, with you know, like a bit more experience, let's say, and some more advanced tools when it comes to international content strategy, for, I would say, it helps us with prioritization as well, not just keyword research, is that we pull data from, I don't know, Ahrefs or your tool of choice, and we have keywords separated by country. So here, dummy data. Okay, this is by no means an actual international keyword research we have conducted for the client, but you can see here that we have, you know, Germany, France, Portugal, and we have keywords that are separated per country. The great thing about our tool, which we use for forecasting in general, in this specific use case, is that we can actually make forecasts on a country level. And if you have some data, like for example, in France, we can see that our tools tells us that the total level of opportunities, you know, something around 22K page views. And you also have some data like, you know, in France, we know that our view to lead conversion rate is 0.5%, and our lead to customer conversion rate is around 4%. And our average LTV for like customers coming from that country is 5K, and our monthly investment for that country, right, is say 10K. Everything is hypothetical, right? But you can see here that with our tool, you can come here and actually make some nice projections that are, once again, country specific. And when it comes to prioritization and choosing countries to go after, I would say that it's way better to have something like this rather than, you know, just go empty-handed to discussions with your CMO to present which countries you should target the next quarter and so on. Okay, going back to our presentation, let me go full screen here. We discussed prioritization and we discussed international, you know, keyword research. So the question is what to pay attention to. The first point I would like you to pay attention to is to identify who your actual competitors are in the international content, in the international market. I'm sorry. And the reason why this is important is because in many cases, in like these regions that you're targeting, there may be some like regional competitors who may have a very strong presence in that market, right? So you may be aware of your direct competitors, say in the US, but when you're targeting a country like France, you need to know that, well, there are some very strong competitors in that country that I should be aware of, okay? The second point I want to make, you shouldn't make assumptions, and you definitely shouldn't assume that your competitors know everything. As we explained, earlier in the case of Canva, yes, they are doing a great job when it comes to their international content strategy, but still there were many pages that were missing from the localized versions of their website that we should identify by ourselves. Okay, and at the same time, we back then in this particular example that I mentioned, we identified after research that many of the keywords they were targeting were simply not the best keywords to go after. Not that they were wrong, but they were not the best keywords to go after. Okay. The third point, direct translations of keywords may not always work. So you should, as I mentioned, have different variations, and you should have different sources of identifying keywords with the goal of like choosing the best keyword and going with the best keyword. And ideally, you should have a person to tell you that, you know what, this sounds not so okay. Let's say people in our country don't use this word like this, so you should better go with that word. You should definitely not forget about country-specific search engines like Yandex in Russia or Baidu in China. You should definitely keep in mind, especially if you are in like finance or you have a legal SaaS or whatever, you should be aware that different countries have different regulations about things, right? And so your content, when you choose to like localize or at least translate it, should comply with these regulations. And the last point I want to make, and we will share an example of that, there are keywords that have different search intents in different countries, okay? This is why you shouldn't just make direct translations and just like use the direct translation of a keyword and create a page based on that. And so the example I want to say here, we have a podcast, okay, the CSO, and the interview I shared earlier with Fabrizio Ballarini was from an interview we did for the podcast. We did an interview with Laura Pascuskaite, who is the head of SEO at SurfShark, and she shared an example that struck me as very interesting. And she told me that the term Wi-Fi VPN in English-speaking markets usually indicates the need to stay secure on public Wi-Fi. When people at SurfShark did the analysis for Poland, they understood that people, when they are searching for something like Wi-Fi VPN, they were actually looking for advice on how to set up a VPN on their home router so they can have a secure Wi-Fi at home, okay? And this basically tells us that the content on the English page and the content on the Polish page, let's say, should be different, okay? And as a matter of fact, if you I'm using Nightwatch as a search simulator, and if you search for something like Wi-Fi VPN in the US, you will see that they rank in position number 19. Doesn't matter. The point is that the search intent here, if you scroll down a bit, you will see best VPN for public Wi-Fi, best VPNs for public Wi-Fi, how to stay secure on public Wi-Fi, and so on and so forth. So this is the intent in English in the US, okay? And they have this blog post here who serves that intent, okay? Now, if you do the same for Poland in Polish and you search for something like Wi-Fi VPN, you will see, of course, I don't know Polish, okay? But you will see that this time they rank in position number 4, okay? With this localized piece of content that you can see here. Now, if you like copy that and just make a simple translation using Google, you will see that the title reads how to configure VPN on your router, okay? Which is basically completely different than this one, which is how to stay safe on public Wi-Fi networks, okay? So essentially what this tells us is that we should never go with direct translations and never make assumptions that, you know what, if this means here, or if people have this in their minds when they are looking for, I don't know, Wi-Fi VPN in the US, this is what they mean in Poland, okay? That's, as we saw just now, is not always the case. Travis, do we have any questions that you would like me to answer?
We do, but I think it can be held until the for a little longer, until the end.
Okay, let's move on then. Then we have URL structure, which we kind of separated from technical SEO, okay? And so URL structure for the localized versions of your website can be really simple, but at the same time can be very complicated and can get really messy really quickly, okay? So a very simple framework that we use at Minuttia when working on international content strategies for our clients, and we have to choose on the URL structure is this. First of all, we use, I'm sorry about that, just give me a sec. Sorry about that. So first of all, as I was saying, we are using hyphens, as you can see here, and not underscores. So in this case, we have a localized version of the website in French for France, right? And we are using a hyphen. Then, even though this is obviously a matter of like personal preference, and I don't know, maybe it's a matter of debate as well, we always go with a subfolder and not a subdomain. Having different subdomains for different like versions of your website complicates things, and you should think of a subdomain as essentially a domain. Okay, it's a separate domain, so it's way better to go with a subfolder, which is as simple as a subfolder, than to go with a subdomain. Okay, then first we identify the language. In this case, French. Okay, and I have the standards here for subfolder, language identifier, and locale identifier. Have the standards that you can use in case you wish to create localized versions of your website. Okay, and then when it comes to locale, we have, after the hyphen, the locale that we are trying to target. Okay, in this case, France. As simple as that. Okay, use this and you will be fine. Don't mess with subdomains. Don't mess with like complicated structures. This is the best structure we've seen so far for creating localized versions of your website. Let's move on. So then we have technical SEO, and this webinar, as we were discussing with Travis before we start recording, is not going to be about technical SEO. Okay, there is another webinar in ClearScope's webinar series about that. I'm just going to briefly say that there are four main things you should keep in mind when it comes to technical SEO. The first, canonical tags. Okay, you should use them appropriately and tag pages appropriately to prevent duplicate content issues. Then we have hreflang tags. According to a study by Ahrefs, which I was reading when I was doing research for this webinar, they identified that 67% of websites do not which have localized versions of their website, right, do not use hreflang tags properly. So that's definitely something you shouldn't miss, right? Because essentially it indicates what this page is and like what is the canonical page, which most likely in many cases will be the English version of that page. Then XML sitemap. You could include or you could create, to begin with, international versions of your website and include them in your XML sitemap, or create language-specific XML sitemaps. And of course, you shouldn't just take the schema markup you have on your, like, say, English pages and just copy that to a page that's targeting French people who speak French in France. You should definitely translate the schema markup for that page as well. Okay, and that's it when it comes to technical SEO. We have two more. steps in the process. The first is obviously, content localization. And I would like to make some points here. These are based on our experience working with, with clients on international content strategies. The first point would be to never roll out many changes all at once. Okay, you should roll out languages one by one, see that everything works as they should be working, and then roll out the next language. Okay. The second point, I would urge you to avoid working with translators. It's better, even though a bit more expensive, to work with native speakers in that language, who ideally live in the countries you are targeting. Okay, you should prioritize and start with those high traffic, high conversion, or content that's important to you for whatever reason. Ideally, you should create, as we saw earlier with Ahrefs, region-specific social media channels, especially if you're linking extensively to these channels from the main version of your website. Okay, and of course, you should implement a feedback system to understand whether or not the localized versions of your website actually resonate, and whether or not there are no issues that, as I explained earlier, could cause even people to not trust your website and not trust you to do business with you. The last point that we have, or the last step in this process, is design, of course, because okay, you did all this effort and you followed all these steps so far. You also have to show people that, what, we have this content in your language. Wouldn't you like to see that content piece in your language, or that page in your language? So 3 points here to not overcomplicate things: a language selector, a language prompt, and any additional elements that you wish to include as part of this step. Okay, now a language selector is as simple as we can see here in my screenshot, just a nice drop-down menu where the user can click on the language that piece of content or page is available at, and just change the version of the page. A language prompt, as you can see here, and I'm not sure if you can see the screenshot well, but this is from Canva, and essentially, I'm in a I'm in a German version of a page, and what they tell me is that, what, we offer this page in a different language, if you wish, because we can see that, you are in a different, let's say, region. If you want, you can switch to that language for that region, okay? And this is a language prompt. And the last one, additional elements, you should keep in mind that different languages take different space, and so your design should be let's say scalable, or in other words, you should make sure that it can accommodate all these variables when it comes to the text that different languages take. Okay, you should keep in mind directionality. There are some languages like Arabic or Hebrew that are written right to left, okay, which of course may require significant design adjustments to ensure a cohesive user experience. You definitely have to keep in mind that there are different colors and different symbols mean different things in different countries or regions, okay? And you should definitely keep that in mind before you make any significant rollouts for these languages and for these regions. And of course, date, time, and number formats. You don't need me to tell you that, these often vary by country and by region. So you should definitely keep that in mind. And I would say, have the foundation or be able, in other words, to make changes when it comes to design without having to, I don't know, restructure your code base or anything like that. Some final thoughts before we move forward with the Q&A. The first would be land and expand. You should start with one language. You should learn from, how the rollout went, and then roll out more languages. As I mentioned earlier, when it comes to content localization, you should definitely not make all rollouts all at once. Okay. Even though you can translate, and we saw a great example by Video.io, they are doing great just by translating content. You should localize if you are serious about that. Definitely recommend it. Your website's core pages, homepage, feature pages, pricing page for a SaaS company should go first. Okay. And the last point, many things can go wrong with a localization project. You should choose to work with experts to avoid any missteps and mistakes. And we have some resources here that you can visit to find out more about not just international content strategy, but content marketing and SEO in general. And that would be it. Let me stop sharing my screen now.
Awesome. Fantastic job. Detailed and thorough as usual. We do have a few questions to kind of kick it off from Anonymous. When should a site allocate resources to localization efforts? They gave some details. They have a SaaS, receive traffic from other countries and have groups of customers in those countries, but US is still their biggest cohort. They're just kind of wondering when they should start focusing on other geos.
First of all, I would say when you see that what you're doing, works really well in one country, that could be, and for one language, English, targeting the US market and other English-speaking countries, I would say that you can start replicating that. Okay. Now, the question, of course, is okay, but which countries should I go first? Should I go after first? And as we saw here, of course, how you will prioritize depends on your goals and what you want to achieve. Really, if you tell me that my goal is, and I report just for traffic and nothing else, okay, then you should pick the biggest traffic drivers in terms of opportunity, right? If you tell me that we are interested in bringing in customers with high LTV, then you should try to get data from customers from these countries and see where the best customers come from, and go after that country, even if Ahrefs tells you that what, this country doesn't, or keywords you want to target in this country doesn't seem to drive as much traffic. It doesn't matter, as long as you know that what, it seems that the Netherlands, for example, are people from the Netherlands are great customers for us. Then you should go after people speaking Dutch and they live in the Netherlands. It's as simple as that, actually. Once you have something that works, replicate it. So I guess that you're already at that stage. And when it comes to prioritization, it goes back to your goals. Is it traffic? Is it customers? Is it whatever it may be? You can see, dive deep in your data, and I would say then it's just a matter of rolling out one country after the other.
Makes sense. And then the next question is URL structure important for just internal organization, or does it actually impact localized search?
I would say that many people may think that URL structure and picking URL slags may not be important, and it's something very mundane. Who cares about URL slags in 2023, right? In my experience, it is important, and you'd want to have something that's clean and that is also evergreen, and you won't have to make significant changes moving forward. Okay, so I would say you can use the structure that we use. it's great, it's evergreen, and you will not have to deal with subdomains or anything like that, which, if anything, make things more complicated.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's helpful. And this is actually the last question. Do all local search engines, you mentioned a couple during the talk, do they have their own kind of like custom panel to submit your sitemap and to kind of manage your like localized SEO efforts?
That's a good question. Some do. And you also have to consider the fact that you can't just simply launch a localized version of a website in some countries, right? In some countries, you even have to go with a website that has a domain, that has this, extension, like .com, for example. Okay. So you have to keep that in mind as well. But I would say that before, like, Google is, fairly big, and I don't see it slowing down anytime soon. So I would say that what you are doing, you should definitely validate it in Google first. And after you see that something is working there, always it's like that. As I mentioned previously, like roll out one language first and then roll out the rest. I will say the same here. Roll out changes in one search engine and then expand in other search engines, and see like the specifics of each search engine and so on.
Awesome. Yeah, that's helpful as well. And that kind of wraps up all the questions we have. Thanks again for joining again today as an insightful presentation. But kind of give you a couple of minutes if you want to kind of have any parting words before we give everyone their time back today.
Yeah. So I guess this is the time where I can just plug my stuff, right? So the agency, you can find us at minuttia.com, /T. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm mostly active there. And on Tuesday, I launched growthwaves.com, which is a bi-weekly newsletter where I share content that I don't share anywhere else.
Now, before we wrap this up, don't forget to share, like, and subscribe so you don't miss out on more great content from the industry's best SEOs, content marketers, and content strategists. The ClearScope webinar series happens every week and helps SEO content creators of all skill levels advance their knowledge. Hope to see you. Tune in next time.